The social media post was a masterpiece of drunken bravado. A truth or dare challenge gone nuclear. Below a blurry photo of him and his circle of degenerate friends, Ian had typed out the caption, a sly jab at convention he thought was hilarious at the time. He told the world that while other people had one face for their fathers and another for everyone else, he and his daddy were more consistent. 13 hours, 14 rounds. Hours later, waking to the brutal glare of morning, the humor had vanished. His phone was a war zone of notifications from his adoptive father, Julian. He scrolled past 70 missed calls, 30 voicemails, each a full minute of charged silence or clipped fury, and an unreadable number of texts. The final message, sent 10 hours ago, burned through his hangover. It informed him, with chilling clarity, that the items had been purchased, the flight was tonight, and if 14 weren't used within 13 hours, there would be hell to pay. A single thought crystallized in his mind. I'm screwed. Sean, emerging from a pile of cushions on the floor, noticed Ian's ashen face. He asked what was wrong, his voice thick with sleep. Ian could only gesture at his phone, a cold dread washing over him as he explained the situation. He'd forgotten to exclude Julian from his Instagram stories audience. Sean's eyes widened as the memory of the dare solidified. The one from last night. The one he'd dared Ian to post. Ian gave a grim, tight nod. 12 hours earlier, it had all been in celebration of Sean's triumphant, if academically disastrous, return from a semester abroad. The usual crew had gathered, the liquor flowed freely, and someone had suggested the game. Fueled by whiskey and poor judgment, the stakes had escalated until Ian, having lost a round, was coerced into posting the scandalous update. The term daddy was, of course, a specific situational endearment, certainly not referring to Julian, and definitely not to his biological father, whose gravestone was likely collecting moss. The accompanying picture was a chaotic collage of their drunken faces. In his stupor, he'd hit share without a second thought for his privacy settings. He took a deep breath, his hand trembling as he navigated to the post, intending to delete the evidence. But the comments section was a fresh hell. A sequel he hadn't asked for. Sean had chimed in, playing the part of a dutiful son, urging him to be gentle with Daddy. Heath had posted a string of crying emojis, lamenting that he wasn't chosen first. Noah had suggested they could all make it work, a harmonious foursome. Then came his mother's comment. She respected his choices, she wrote, but foreseemed a bit excessive. She urged caution and good hygiene, and begged him not to let Julian see the post, fearing for Ian's life. His film studies professor had simply commented with a respectful nod and a single word, blessed. And then, at the very bottom, Julian's contribution. A single, chilling word, indeed. Ian felt as if a bolt of lightning had struck him. 10 hours ago. That meant Julian was likely already on the ground, probably already on his way over. He launched himself from the sofa, a frantic scramble through the debris of the party for his sneakers. To die was one thing, but to be disciplined in front of his friends was another. Heath stumbled out of the bathroom, blocking his path. He asked where the fire was. Ian, wrestling with a shoelace, barked that he had to go. If his dad came looking, Heath was to tell him Ian was already dead. Heath, still half drunk, latched onto his arm, asking for details on the cause of death. Ian, exasperated, told him to say they'd fought and he'd been killed in the brawl. He shook Heath off and yanked open the apartment door. A familiar figure stood on the threshold, perfectly still. Julian, dressed in a Tom Ford suit so sharp it could cut glass, the top 2 buttons of his shirt undone. He stood there, an image of devastating composure, his eyes a swirling vortex of unreadable emotion. Ian swallowed hard, unsure if the feeling in his gut was fear or something else entirely. Julian took a deliberate step forward, an eyebrow arching. He repeated Ian's own words back to him, his voice a low murmur. Killed in a brawl. That. The word was a reflex, a whisper of dread. Ian instinctively backed away. As he searched for an explanation, Noah sat bolt upright on the sofa, as if resurrected, and yelled out, asking what they did to him last night, because his ass was killing him. Julian's face went dark. Ian's world went numb. After a few seconds of crushing silence, Ian forced a laugh, explaining that Noah had slipped on a beer bottle and landed hard on the coffee table. He assured Julian that he had absolutely no interest in Noah's ass. Julian's gaze was predatory. "Of course you're not interested," he said, his voice dangerously soft. "But it seems his interest in you is another matter entirely." Ian stared, baffled by the leap of logic. Julian's eyes swept the room, landing on Sean. Seeing the intent in his gaze, Ian quickly moved to block Julian's path into the apartment. Julian's eyes lowered to meet his. "Afraid I'll go in?" "No, not afraid." Ian forced himself to loop his arm through Julian's, the fabric of the expensive suit cool beneath his trembling fingers. He rambled about the mess inside, how it would surely offend Julian's meticulous sensibilities. He suggested they just go home, that Julian must be exhausted after his flight, that he would cook for him. He knew if Julian went in there and laid a hand on Sean, he'd be forced to intervene. And then they'd both face Julian's particular brand of punishment, the mechanics of which were a secret he guarded closely. Julian looked down at the hand clutching his arm, his expression unreadable. After a long moment, he relented. "Fine. We'll go home and have a proper talk." The emphasis he placed on the last few words made Ian's blood run cold. Today was not going to end well. The first time they had met, Ian was trying to dig up his father's grave. It was raining, a miserable downpour that blurred the world into a gray watercolor. Julian had appeared beside him, a stark silhouette under a black umbrella, his suit blending into the stormy sky. He had placed a hand on Ian's muddy own, telling him to let it go, that the man was dead. Ian, bewildered, had looked up, his wet hair plastered to his face. Through the chaos, he saw nothing clearly. After a moment of stunned silence, he snatched his hand back and resumed his frantic digging, ignoring the pain in his scraped fingers. Julian's voice grew firmer, repeating that it was over. Ian collapsed to his knees, the feeling in his hands long gone. But he tried to argue. Julian's tone softened as he knelt, his voice an anchor in the storm. "Come on. I'll take you home." Ian was desperate. "But his wallet," he said, his voice breaking with despair. "Can't leave it. The bank card is still in his jacket." Later, in the pristine interior of Julian's Bentley, a black card was tossed into his lap. He shook the rain from his hair, droplets scattering across the supple leather, and stared at the plastic. Julian, wincing at the mess, asked how much was on the card in the grave. 700, Ian mumbled. 700,000, Julian confirmed, his face impassive. "It will be transferred to your new card." Ian clutched the card, a wave of suspicion washing over him. This had to be a mistake. Maybe his deadbeat father had owed this man money and sold him as collateral. But that couldn't be right. He wasn't worth 700,000. You'd have to subtract a few zeros and they'd still be overpaying. Julian studied him for a moment before clarifying. "I was your mother's younger brother." Ian's brow furrowed. He had understood his mother to have grown up in the foster system, without any family. Julian explained that before she ran off with Ian's father, his own father had taken her in for a time. So Ian blinked. "You're my uncle?" It seemed a miraculous trade. One gambling-addicted father for a handsome, wealthy uncle. "No," Julian stated flatly. "I'm your father." Ian's eyes widened. He immediately jumped to the most scandalous conclusion. An affair. His mother was a sucker for a handsome face. It was why she'd fallen for his dad. This man was leagues more attractive. It made a certain kind of sense. In the span of a few seconds, he had processed and accepted this new reality. Julian's face hardened. "Stop watching so much television." Ian scratched his head, quickly pivoting to another theory. "Then it was you. You're the one who had the affair. It was your mother who entrusted you to me." Julian produced a sheaf of documents Ian couldn't begin to decipher and dropped them in his lap. "From now on, I'm your father." "But..." Ian looked from the papers to the man beside him, who couldn't be that much older than he was. "No buts. Call me Dad." "Dad." Back in the penthouse, Julian tossed his jacket onto a rack by the door. Ian remained frozen in the entryway, his gaze drawn to the man. The collar of Julian's shirt was loose, revealing the strong line of his throat. His sleeves were rolled up, showing muscular forearms. Ian swallowed, his feet refusing to move. Julian settled onto the sofa, crossing his legs, and leaned back. One hand rested on the armrest, his fingers drumming a silent, unnerving rhythm. His legs felt weak. Julian turned his head, his eyes locking onto Ian. The look was part interrogation, part amusement. "Enjoying the draft? Get in here." There was no escape. Steeling himself, Ian took a tentative step into the living room. "Wait," Julian's voice cut through the air. Ian froze, 1 foot in, 1 foot out. Julian loosened his tie, a faint, cruel smile playing on his lips. "Who said you could walk? Kneel. Crawl." Ian's forward momentum reversed. He retreated a step, his hands twisting the hem of his shirt. "Dad, I'm sorry. I won't drink again. I'll never play that game again." Julian's expression didn't change. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, as he repeated the command. "Crawl." The heavy curtains blocked out the afternoon sun, plunging the room into twilight. The only light came from the open doorway behind him, casting Ian's long shadow over Julian's seated form. Ian clenched his jaw, his knees hitting the cold marble floor. He moved forward on all fours, a slow, humiliating journey across the vast expanse of the living room until he was stopped by the tip of Julian's shoe tilting his chin up. "Explain." He recounted the previous night's events, his voice small, concluding with a pathetic plea for forgiveness. Julian listened without a word, his face a blank mask. After a long silence, he withdrew his foot and sat up straighter. "Take off your belt." Ian's head snapped up. "Dad, are you really going to 13 hours, 14? A single look from Julian silenced him. He obediently unbuckled his belt and handed it over. Julian took it, folded it in half, and snapped it taut. The sharp crack echoed in the silent room, sending a shiver down Ian's spine. Julian clicked his tongue in disapproval. "The quality of this leather is abysmal." "Then why don't you use your own?" Ian muttered under his breath. "Mine is worth more than your life." "Damn capitalist." Julian rose to his feet, circling him slowly. "And to think I pushed 3 meetings and flew all this way with a bag full of supplies, just for you to tell me it was a game of truth or dare." Ian blinked. That was what he was angry about? Before he could process it, the belt sliced through the air, landing with a sharp sting across his backside. A jolt shot through his entire body. His hands clenched the fabric of his jeans, nails digging into his palms. Julian never held back. The blows fell, one after another, rhythmic and punishing. Ian bit his lip, trying to stifle any sound, but a low groan escaped his throat. His legs trembled, barely supporting him. 13 minutes, 14 rounds. Julian's voice came from behind him, a dark, musing sound. I'm almost tempted to see if you have the stamina. Something small and hard was tossed onto the coffee table. Ian turned his head. It was a box, extra large. His face went pale. No, I don't. I was bluffing. When he met Sean a few days later, his legs were still unsteady. Sean, with the unspoken understanding of old friends, had a padded cushion waiting for him at the cafe. He watched Ian's pained movements, noting his pale complexion, and remarked that his dad must have been particularly rough this time. Ian clutched his lower back, his voice filled with despair. Inhumane. It was absolutely inhumane. Sean offered a moment of silent sympathy before changing the subject to his own concerns. He wanted to know if Ian had asked about the guy he'd mentioned. Ian's mind, still fuzzy, slowly recalled the request. Before being shipped off to Europe, Sean had a massive crush on a boy from his high school, a straight-A student and valedictorian named Leo. Sean, who had perfected the art of academic apathy from birth, couldn't have been more different. Unsure of Leo's orientation, he'd gotten drunk at a graduation party and cornered the poor guy, kissing him senseless. The aftermath had been swift. A horrified Leo, stunned classmates, and Sean's father bundling him onto a plane overseas. Years had passed, but the obsession remained. The reason he'd asked Ian was simple. They both attended the same university, though Leo had earned his spot, while Ian's was courtesy of several large donations from Julian that came with a legacy admission attached. Ian took a sip of his coffee. He said Leo was doing fine, healthy, and active. Sean kicked him under the table, annoyed. He wanted to know if he was dating anyone. Ian pulled his leg back, telling his friend he wouldn't help him harass the guy again. Sean insisted it was just a casual question, that after all this time he didn't really care one way or the other. He's seeing someone. Damn it. Sean shot to his feet, slamming his hand on the table. A waiter hurried over, asking if everything was all right. Sean, pacing furiously, waved him away, claiming he just bumped his knee. Once they were alone again, Ian clicked his tongue, observing how little Sean seemed to care. Sean scowled. He asked if Ian was sure if he was lying. Ian assured him it was true. Leo had been open about not being single. Still, Sean wasn't convinced. He demanded to know if Ian had seen this supposed girlfriend with his own eyes. Ian reminded him that they were in the same college, not roommates. This isn't right, Sean grumbled, running a hand through his hair. I won't believe it until I see her. Ian was exasperated. He told Sean to let it go. But Sean was spiraling, complaining that he had remained celibate for years for Leo's sake. Ian advised him not to be so self-important, reminding him that he had sexually assaulted Leo, and the fact that he hadn't been reported to the police was a kindness. He had no right to expect loyalty. Sean, knowing he was in the wrong but still stubborn, insisted he had to see for himself. What if this girlfriend was just using him? Ian gave him a suspicious look. You don't have to introduce yourself. Get lost. Sean sat back down, a plan forming in his mind. He told Ian he needed his help. He wanted Ian to ask Leo's girlfriend out. Ian balked at the idea, asking why Sean couldn't do it himself. Sean mumbled that he couldn't bring himself to talk to Leo. It was the first time Ian had ever seen him look ashamed. He told Ian that all he had to do was confess his feelings for Leo. Leo would naturally reject him, citing his relationship, and then Ian could casually ask about her. It was a terrible, brilliant plan. "You're a goddamn evil genius," Ian said through gritted teeth. Sean begged, promising eternal servitude. He wasn't worried about Ian's confession succeeding. He looked Ian up and down and stated with blunt certainty that even if Leo were gay, the two of them would never work. They were the same type. Against his better judgment, Ian agreed. After his last class, he found Leo on his way out of the building. He was a year older but looked younger, with a slender build and a quiet, unassuming demeanor that betrayed none of his academic brilliance. He looked up at Ian, a little intimidated. "You know who I am?" Ian asked, surprised. They moved in completely different circles. Leo offered a small smile, explaining that he'd once subbed for one of their professors. That made sense. Ian never remembered anything that happened in a classroom. After a brief, awkward exchange, Leo asked if there was something he needed. "Yeah," Ian said, deciding to rip the bandage off. "I'm here to confess. I like you. Let's go out." Leo's eyes widened, and he took an involuntary step back, looking like a startled deer. Ian pressed him for an answer. Leo's gaze darted around nervously, then his eyes went wide, focusing on something behind Ian's shoulder. "Behind you," Ian turned. Leaning against a sleek black car was Julian. A long, dark coat accentuated his tall, lean frame. His hands were tucked into his pockets, his gaze locked on Ian, an inscrutable expression on his face. An icy chill crept down Ian's spine. He had no idea how long Julian had been standing there. "Mr. Vance," Leo said, his voice polite. Julian gave a curt nod, his eyes never leaving Ian. Ian forced a laugh, turning back to Leo, commenting on what a small world it was. "Yes, a very small world," Julian interjected, his voice smooth as silk. He opened the passenger door. "Get in." Ian hesitated, a sense of doom settling over him. He grabbed Leo's arm, a desperate anchor. "What a coincidence we all know each other. We should all get dinner." Julian's eyes narrowed dangerously on Ian's hand clutching Leo's sleeve. Leo, sensing the shift in the atmosphere, quickly made his excuses and disappeared, leaving Ian alone to face the music. "Are your legs broken?" Julian asked, his voice low. "Get in the car." Before Julian could say another word, Ian dropped to his knees on the pavement beside him. "Dad, listen to me, this is all a huge misunderstanding. No wonder it only took 4 before you passed out." Julian leaned against the car, his arms crossed. "I suppose I'm just not your type." The memory of that night sent a hot flush through Ian. "No, it's not that. I don't like him. I was just what?" Julian's face was a thundercloud, leaving no room for argument. "I like you." The words tumbled out before he could stop them. He blinked. Was this really happening? A confession on the cold pavement of a university parking lot? Where were the flowers? The romantic music? Julian's fingers gripped his chin, forcing Ian to meet his gaze. "You'll say those words to him, but you won't say them to me?" Ian was floored. He couldn't even remember what he'd said to Leo. How could Julian's memory be so sharp? And Julian leaned in, his voice a low whisper, his breath warm against Ian's skin. "Say you like me." It wasn't that he didn't know how Julian felt or how he himself felt, but the words spoken aloud felt like a transgression. "Dad, don't call me Dad." Julian's lips brushed against his earlobe. "I've never once thought of you as my son." He pulled his head back slightly. "Uncle." "Julian Vance, do you have to be so determined to ruin the mood?" Ian bit his lower lip. "What should I call you? Julian? Or Vance? Vance or Julian?" A breathy question. Julian's mouth moved to his neck, his voice a devilish murmur. "Which do you think I prefer?" Ian trembled, a shiver running through him that had nothing to do with the cold. "Julian," he whispered, "I love you." The hands that had been expertly tormenting him froze. For the first time, Ian saw a crack in the unflappable composure of the man who controlled boardrooms and terrified subordinates. A flicker of something raw and vulnerable in his eyes. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough. "How many people have you even met that you can talk about love?" Ian pushed himself up, pressing Julian back against the car. "And how many people have you met that you still have to question my love for you?" It was an improvement. This time it took 5 before he passed out. He woke up late the next afternoon. Julian was gone. He didn't need to explain himself about Leo anymore. The previous night's discussion had made that irrelevant. He limped to the shower. When he emerged, he found his phone, which he dropped and powered off during the campus confrontation. The moment he turned it on, it was flooded with messages from Sean, all demanding to know the outcome of his mission. He bypassed the frantic voicemails and dialed him directly. Sean answered on the second ring, his voice a barrage of questions. Ian, still wrapped in a pink-hued daze, replied vaguely that it had gone well, that it had been quite satisfying. A few seconds of silence followed on the other end, then a nearly 10-minute-long tirade of colorful insults. When Sean finally paused for breath, Ian managed to get a word in, clarifying that he was talking about himself, and he sighed. It was pointless trying to explain it to a perpetually single friend like Sean. Sean, his voice hoarse, demanded the full story. Ian recounted the events at the university, omitting the second half of the evening. Sean, relieved, was also frustrated that Ian had been apprehended before getting an answer. He insisted Ian had to find Leo again and finish the job. Ian protested, terrified of getting caught by Julian a second time. The potential consequences were too painful to imagine. But Sean was relentless, and eventually, Ian caved. Leo spent most of his time in the library. It was a safer bet than confronting him out in the open. Ian found him on the second floor, a book open in front of him. Ian approached, grabbing a random Bible from a nearby shelf and sliding into the chair beside him. Leo looked up, a flicker of discomfort in his eyes before he managed a polite smile. To Ian's suggestion they sit together, Leo gestured to the empty chair beside him, saying it was taken. "No problem." Ian reached into his pocket, pulled out a wad of cash, and offered it to the studious-looking young man sitting on Leo's other side, telling him to go buy some coffee. The student, stunned, took the money as Ian politely ushered him to another table. Once seated, Leo instinctively edged his chair away. Ian told him not to be scared, he didn't bite. Leo's smile was strained. "But I think Mr. Vance does." Ian grinned. "He doesn't bite people. Other things, maybe." He then got straight to the point, saying he needed an answer. Leo looked at him, confused, and stated the obvious. Ian wasn't actually interested in him. Ian told him to just pretend he was. Internally, he cursed Sean and his stupid plan. Leo, though bewildered, politely rejected him. "I'm sorry. There's someone I like." Bingo. Ian pressed for details, asking if this was someone he was just interested in, or someone he was actually dating. Leo's eyes dropped to his book. He confessed that they were sort of dating. He explained that the day after they got together, the person had left. Ian's jaw dropped. Did they pass away? He quickly apologized for his bluntness. Leo waved his hands frantically. No. He just went abroad. So it was a long-distance thing right from the start. That had to be tough. Leo agreed. his voice laced with an unreadable sadness. He admitted that he sometimes wondered if the person had ever really liked him at all. He explained that it felt like he was being given the cold shoulder, that they hadn't been in contact for a very long time. How long? Ian asked, his inner gossip columnist now fully engaged. 3 years, 2 months, and 9 days. The precision of the answer was staggering. Ian looked at him with newfound sympathy. Buddy, you've been played. Leo looked lost. Played? Ian couldn't believe it. He told Leo that, for someone so smart, he was incredibly dense when it came to relationships. He explained that if someone doesn't contact you for that long, they're either dead, have joined a monastery, or they use going abroad as an excuse to ghost you. Leo's fingers tightened, creasing the page of his book. He shook his head, insisting it couldn't be true. Ian tried to reason with him, but Leo was adamant. He thanked Ian for his concern, stood up, and said he had to leave. As he walked away, Ian realized he'd forgotten the most important part. He scrambled after him. Wait, I never asked. What's her name? Leo hesitated. You don't know him? Ian insisted, even offering to use Julian's extensive connections to help track the person down. The offer seemed to sway Leo. He paused, then spoke 3 words. Sean Miller. Oh, him. Yeah. Sean Miller. Wait. Sean Miller. The first shout was Ian. The second came from Sean himself, who had been lurking nearby, poorly disguised in a hoodie and sunglasses. They were promptly thrown out of the library by an incensed librarian. The 3 of them stood on the steps, blinking in the afternoon sun, a triangle of awkward silence. Sean was blushing furiously. Leo looked as though he'd seen a ghost. Ian, exasperated, told them to do something. In broad daylight, Sean squeaked. Leo finally found his voice. Sean? You're back. Yeah. Sean mumbled, staring at the ground. Realizing he was a very bright third wheel, Ian clapped Sean on the shoulder in encouragement and began to walk away. He heard Leo's voice behind him, thick with emotion. Why did you leave? Why did you change your number? I've been waiting for you. I thought you didn't want me anymore. Sean's words came in a rush. He explained that his dad had forced him to go, had canceled his old phone plan. He swore he never wanted to leave him, but then faltered. It wasn't like he'd ever really had him to begin with. Ian stopped in his tracks. That was the wrong thing to say. He could feel Leo's heartbreak from 20 feet away. Leo's breath hitched. What do you mean, you never had me? That night, I said yes. I said yes to your confession. When you kissed me in front of everyone, I was scared, but I didn't push you away. I thought we were together. Sean looked utterly baffled. When did you say yes? When did I even confess? That night before you kissed me. Leo's voice was filled with pain. You don't remember any of it, do you? All these years, it was just me. I was the only one who thought we were together. No, that's not it, Sean stammered, completely flustered. I get blackouts when I drink. All I remember is kissing you. Please don't be upset. I really do like you. I was wrong. I'm so sorry. The rest was too saccharine for Ian to endure. He made his way to the parking garage and called Julian. He was buzzing with excitement, eager to tell him about the wickedly fun-themed hotel he'd just booked for them. The phone rang a few times before Julian answered, his voice a cool, professional query. What is it? Ian opened his mouth to speak, but a sudden, sharp pain exploded at the back of his head. His body pitched forward, the phone slipping from his grasp and clattering against the concrete. The world spun, darkness creeping in at the edges of his vision. Just before he lost consciousness, he heard Julian's voice through the phone speaker, frantic and raw with a panic he had never heard before. calling his name over and over. He woke to a throbbing headache and the smell of mildew. He was in a dimly lit warehouse, his hands and feet bound with coarse rope that bit into his skin with every movement. "Help! Somebody, help!" he yelled, relieved to find his mouth wasn't gagged. A heavy door creaked open, and two men entered, one covered in tattoos, the other with long dreadlocks. The tattooed man sneered, telling him to save his voice for later. Ian pressed himself against a dusty crate. The line felt unnervingly cliché. He asked them who they were and what they wanted. "Money, of course," the man said, kicking an empty bottle. "Then you've got the wrong guy. I'm broke. My last name is Cole, his is Vance. He's not my real dad. My real dad was a degenerate gambler." The man with dreadlocks pulled out a knife and held it near Ian's face. His breath was foul. "Stop playing games." Ian, who had been taught self-defense by tutors Julian had hired for precisely this scenario, gave up the act. He had been working the ropes loose with a small blade concealed in his ring. With a final twist, his hands were free. The man with the knife lunged. Ian kicked out, sending him flying. The tattooed man froze, unsure whether to fight or flee. Ian slowly got to his feet, stretching his cramped muscles. The man with dreadlocks staggered up, spitting blood. They were in deep trouble. He told his partner that Julian Vance was on his way, and they needed to get out before the police arrived. As they turned to run, Ian called out for them to wait. They ran faster. He caught up easily, grabbing each of them by the collar. The tattooed man started begging for his life. Ian told them to calm down. He wanted them to help him with a little performance. If they played their parts well, he would make it worth their while. When Julian arrived, Ian was a picture of terrified innocence, the ropes held loosely in his hands. The two kidnappers, trembling, recited the lines Ian had fed them. They told Julian they were surprised he had come alone. Julian stood with his hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. "State your terms. Your entire net worth," the tattooed man squeaked. "Done," Julian said without a moment's hesitation. Ian almost broke character and laughed. The kidnapper, following Ian's script, repeated the demand, clarifying that they meant everything. His company, his properties, his cars, even the ridiculously expensive belt he was wearing. "Fine," Julian replied. "Now let him go." The kidnappers looked at each other, then at Ian, who was still deeply immersed in his role. They improvised. "How do we know we can trust you? We want it all now." "Property transfers require lawyers," Julian said, his eyes fixed on Ian. "But you can have the belt." As Julian's hand went to the buckle, Ian dropped the ropes and leaped forward, stopping him. "Dad, you can't be so generous." Julian caught his hand. "Not pretending anymore?" Ian grinned. "I got tired of it. It was a close call, though. I almost let someone else get your belt." The two kidnappers stared at them, utterly bewildered. Was this whole thing just part of their foreplay? It wasn't until they were in the car that Ian noticed a large ink stain on the cuff of Julian's otherwise immaculate shirt. Knowing Julian's obsessive cleanliness, the small imperfections spoke volumes. He shifted in his seat, a giddy feeling bubbling up inside him. "You were worried about me, weren't you?" Julian stared straight ahead, offering a non-committal hum. "You were scared I was going to get hurt." This time, Julian didn't answer. He simply pulled the car over to the side of the road, cut the engine, and kissed him. It was a deep, desperate kiss that left Ian breathless. When he finally pulled away, Ian wrapped his arms around his neck, ready for more. But Julian just looked at him. "Dad, what did you call me?" "Julian." Julian stared at him for a long moment. "Using your own safety as a game, You truly believe I won't punish you for that? Ian's eyes lit up with anticipation. What kind of punishment did you have in mind? Julian leaned in, whispering in his ear. As dusk settled, the silhouette of a figure inside the car could be seen struggling to sit up, before collapsing back against the seat with a groan. No more. We're just getting started, a cool voice replied. You were the one who promised 13 hours and 14 rounds.